The night the billionaire was supposed to die began with silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy, suffocating kind that filled the top floor of St. Augustine Medical Center. Machines blinked quietly, doctors whispered in tense voices, and 20 of the most brilliant specialists in the country stood around a hospital bed looking defeated. In the center of the room lay Victor Halstead, a man whose name built skyscrapers, funded universities, and controlled companies across 3 continents. Yet at that moment, none of his power mattered. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale, and every monitor in the room suggested the same terrifying truth: they were losing him. The doctors had tried everything: experimental treatments, emergency surgeries, rare medications flown in from across the world, but nothing worked. Every attempt only bought him a few more fragile minutes. The room was thick with the quiet panic of professionals who were not used to failing. Outside the room, beyond the expensive marble floors and glowing hallways, a tired janitor slowly pushed his mop bucket down the corridor. His name was Daniel Reyes. Most people in the hospital barely noticed him. To them, he was just the man who cleaned the floors late at night when the hallways were quiet. But Daniel carried more weight on his shoulders than most of the people inside that hospital. He was a single father raising a 7-year-old daughter named Sophia. His wife had died 3 years earlier after a long illness, leaving Daniel with grief, hospital bills, and a child who needed him more than anything. Every day he worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. Still, no matter how hard life became, Daniel refused to become bitter. Because Sophia believed her father was a hero, and sometimes that belief was the only thing that kept him going. Before we continue this story, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness can change lives, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in second chances and unexpected heroes. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the greatest miracles come from the most unlikely people. That night, Daniel wasn't thinking about billionaires or miracles. He was thinking about Sophia. Earlier that evening, she had asked him a question while doing homework at the kitchen table. "Daddy, why do you always work at night?" Daniel had smiled softly and brushed her hair behind her ear. "Because some heroes work when everyone else is sleeping." Sophia had giggled and returned to her drawing, completely convinced her father was saving the world 1 floor at a time. Now, as Daniel quietly mopped the hallway outside the ICU wing, the doors to Victor Halstead's room suddenly burst open. A doctor rushed out, his face pale and exhausted. "We're running out of time," he muttered to another specialist. Daniel tried not to stare, but the tension was impossible to ignore. He had cleaned hospital floors long enough to recognize desperation. Something was very wrong. Curiosity pulled his eyes toward the slightly open door of the billionaire's room. Inside, a crowd of doctors surrounded the bed like soldiers who had already lost the battle. Daniel lowered his mop slowly. In his previous life, before tragedy had changed everything, Daniel had studied something very different from janitorial work. He had been a medical student. Years earlier, Daniel had been one of the most promising students at his university. He dreamed of becoming a doctor, of helping people who couldn't afford expensive treatments. But dreams can collapse quickly when life strikes hard. When his wife became sick, Daniel dropped out of school to care for her. Medical bills piled up, savings vanished, and after she passed away, the only job he could find quickly enough to support Sophia was cleaning hospitals. Most people assumed he had never belonged in the medical world, but Daniel never stopped learning. During his night shifts, he quietly read old medical journals discarded by doctors. He listened carefully to conversations in hallways. Medicine had never left his heart, and now, standing outside the ICU door, he heard something that made his stomach tighten. One doctor spoke quietly but urgently. "We've checked everything: toxicology, neurological scans, infections. There's nothing left to try." Another doctor shook his head. "It doesn't make sense. His symptoms don't match anything." Daniel's eyes slowly drifted toward the patient inside the room. Victor Halstead's breathing pattern caught his attention first, then the faint tremor in his hand, then the slightly bluish tone around his lips. A strange feeling crept into Daniel's mind. Something was wrong with the diagnosis, very wrong. He hesitated. Who was he to question 20 specialists? He was just a janitor. But then another thought appeared in his mind. Sophia's voice. "Heroes work when everyone else is sleeping." Daniel took a deep breath. His heart pounded as he stepped forward and gently knocked on the ICU door. The doctors turned immediately. Some looked confused, others looked annoyed. One of them spoke sharply. "You can't be in here." Daniel quickly raised his hands apologetically. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I was just cleaning outside and I noticed something about the patient's breathing." A few doctors exchanged irritated glances. One of them sighed impatiently. "Sir, this is a restricted area." Daniel nodded respectfully. "I understand, but please, just check one thing." The room fell quiet for a moment. Exhaustion had worn down even the most arrogant doctors. Finally, one of the older specialists spoke. "What exactly did you notice?" Daniel stepped slightly closer, careful not to touch anything. His eyes studied the monitors. "I think it might not be organ failure." The doctors frowned. "Then what is it?" Daniel pointed gently toward the patient's neck and hands. "The tremors, the breathing rhythm, the skin color. It reminds me of something I studied years ago." The room grew even quieter. Daniel swallowed nervously. Certain rare cleaning chemicals can cause delayed toxic reactions if mixed incorrectly. They create gases that don't show up on standard toxicology tests right away. The doctors stared at him. One of them leaned forward. "Are you saying poisoning?" Daniel shook his head. "Not intentional, accidental exposure." He gestured toward the billionaire's oxygen mask. "If the gas entered his system earlier today, the symptoms would look exactly like this." The lead doctor's expression suddenly shifted. "What chemical?" Daniel spoke slowly. "A combination of ammonia and certain disinfectants can create chloramine gas." The room froze, because that gas could cause respiratory collapse if inhaled in a confined space. One doctor quickly checked the patient's chart. His office was disinfected this afternoon. Another doctor immediately began issuing orders. "Run blood gas analysis again. Check for chemical inhalation markers. Increase oxygen flow and prepare respiratory treatment." The room exploded with sudden movement. Machines beeped faster. Nurses rushed in. Daniel quietly stepped backward toward the door, unsure if he had helped or embarrassed himself. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Then suddenly one of the monitors began to stabilize. The patient's breathing grew stronger. The lead doctor stared at the screen in disbelief. "It's working." Another doctor checked the lab results. Chemical exposure confirmed. 20 specialists had spent hours searching for complex diseases, and the answer had been hiding in something as simple as a cleaning chemical reaction. Slowly, Victor Halstead's oxygen levels climbed. Color returned to his face, the room filled with stunned relief. Across the hall, Daniel quietly picked up his mop again. He never expected anyone to notice, but someone did. An hour later, a tall woman in an elegant coat stepped off a private elevator. Her face showed both power and fear. She was Olivia Halstead, Victor's daughter and the acting CEO of his global empire. Doctors quickly explained everything to her, how her father had nearly died, how an accidental gas exposure almost fooled every specialist in the hospital, and how one unexpected person noticed the truth. "Who was it?" she asked quietly. The lead doctor gestured down the hallway. "The janitor." Olivia blinked in confusion. "The janitor?" They found Daniel near the end of the corridor, quietly cleaning the floor like nothing had happened. When Olivia approached him, Daniel looked up nervously. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she asked softly, "Are you the one who saved my father?" Daniel shifted awkwardly. "I just noticed something. The doctors did the real work." But Olivia's eyes were already shining with emotion. 20 specialists missed it. She paused, studying him carefully. "Why do you know so much about medicine?" Daniel hesitated. Then he simply answered honestly. "I used to be a medical student." Olivia's expression changed. "What happened?" Daniel glanced down the hallway, thinking of Sophia waiting at home. "Life happened." There was something in his voice that carried years of quiet sacrifice. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, and in that moment something shifted in her mind. A man who gave up his dreams to care for his family. A man who still used his knowledge to help a stranger. A man who asked for nothing in return. That kind of person was rare, very rare. 2 weeks later, Victor Halstead walked out of the hospital alive. News of the mysterious janitor hero quietly spread through the hospital staff. But Daniel expected life to return to normal, cleaning floors, working nights, raising Sophia. Until one morning when a black car stopped outside his apartment building. Inside was Olivia Halstead. She carried a folder, and inside that folder was something that would change Daniel's life forever. A full scholarship to finish medical school, a job offer waiting for him at Halstead Medical Foundation once he graduated, and childcare support so Sophia would always be cared for. Daniel stared at the papers in disbelief. "I can't accept this," Olivia smiled gently. "You already did the most important work." She placed the folder in his hands. "You reminded 20 experts that wisdom can come from anywhere." Daniel felt tears in his eyes, not because of the opportunity, but because someone finally believed in the person he used to be. Before we reach the end of this story, take a moment to comment, "Kindness changes destinies." If you believe one good act can transform someone's life. Years later, Dr. Daniel Reyes stood in a hospital hallway again, but this time his name was written on the door of the emergency department. Patients trusted him, colleagues respected him, and Sophia, now a teenager, still told everyone proudly that her dad was a hero. Sometimes the world overlooks quiet people, the janitors, the workers, the parents sacrificing their dreams. But every once in a while, life gives those people a moment, a single moment where kindness, courage, and knowledge come together. And in that moment, everything changes. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe for more stories that remind us humanity is still alive in this world. Because sometimes the person who saves a billionaire is the man quietly cleaning the floor.